Thank you, Christian, and hopefully I've got my slides shared there. So good morning, afternoon, evening to various people around the world. Good to see some names who've been at previous EAMS and some new names too. So welcome. As Christian mentioned, I'm part of the organising committee as well, and I just wanted to open by giving a big thanks to Christian for all of his hard work putting together another EAMS conference. So excellent. So this talk, this was originally intended to be a lightning talk, actually, about a staff survey on the use of e-assessment, a survey to which not many staff replied, which in itself is quite an interesting thing to talk about. But actually, when we had the planning meeting, the talk got promoted up the agenda to the opening session, and the content has expanded a little bit. So it's actually largely based on a series of discussions I had with key colleagues here at Newcastle University, and I hope that those discussions, the outcome of those discussions, will create some interesting insights into perspectives of different people involved in a university department here, their views about e-assessment, and I hope we'll get you in the mood for the conference ahead. So I think it will raise some questions. You know, how do we engage colleagues with the assessment? How far do we go with transforming written assessments to digital? How can we better understand how universities view a sort of specialist mathematical assessment like we have here at Newcastle? So I'm not aiming to answer all of those questions, but I think those will be posed as we go along. So we have, I think, quite a unique setup at Newcastle. I guess we are, in terms of the extent to which we've used specialist mathematical assessment software, we are probably right up there. You know, in terms in particular, things like how far we've gone with digital exams, that sort of thing. So we are in quite a unique position, and I think what I hope is that position will give some perspectives that will be interesting to you, but I think it also is a caveat for, you know, the relevance to some of your institutions, that we are very different in the way we're able to support e-assessment here. So Christian and myself and others make up what we call our digital learning units. And we sit in a school of, it's actually math, stats and physics here in our university. And our sort of broad remit is to support the use of technology to enhance learning and teaching in our school and beyond around the wider university. We are here really very much thanks to the development of numbers. And my talk is not about, I mean, it is about numbers, but I'm trying to make it as broad as possible, really more about approaches to e-assessment. I've counted, though, as I mentioned, numbers 15 times on the slide, so you'll have to put up with that. But we are here because of the development of numbers. And I picked out a photo. So this is from the very first EAMS that we held here at Newcastle in 2016. And I saw some names in the participants list there. I see some people who were here on in that week, I think it was, of events. Maybe it was 3 days, maybe 3 days of talks. And in the picture there's myself, Christian, who you've seen already this morning, and my predecessor, Bill Foster. So Bill really pioneered the use of e-assessment here at Newcastle, and was here for the onset of numbers, and Christian was brought in to develop numbers. That was over 10 years ago now, and it's sort of grown from there. And our team has grown significantly as well. So from next month, we're going to have 6 team members, 5 permanent, one on a 15-month contract. And so that's 3 academics, 2 dedicated to software development, and 1 content development, our temp. So we've really sort of grown quite a lot since then. And at Newcastle, as I mentioned, we use numbers, we use mathematical assessment a lot. So numbers has been around since about 2012 here in our department. It's now used across the university. So we're in nearly 100 modules around our university, and the vast majority of those are in our own school, Maths, Stats and Physics, and the School of Engineering, but also various places outside, so business, chemistry, biological sciences, biomedical sciences, sorry, biology, chemistry, lots of places around our university. We host over 100,000 student assessment attempts each year, and I think most significantly in the past few years has been that we've become part of our university's digital exam solution. So we run a lot of digital exams at Newcastle, and Numbers has been adopted as a sort of approved bit of software, as approved as it could get. So that's a bit about Numbers at Newcastle. So as I mentioned, this started off with a series of some surveys that went out to staff, and also some dialogues that I was having with academic colleagues, just chatting to them about what their training needs are, about how we could work with them to transform assessments to numbers, and chatting to them about their concerns and where they see their assessments going. And when I was asked to promote this talk up to the first day, I decided to be a bit more pinpoint about those dialogues, and selected various stakeholders, if you like, various people who are key in our school and beyond in the sort of adoption of numbers. So I'm going to be cycling, if you like, sort of outward from sort of our own school, our sort of core activities. So talking about our stage 1, which is really a sort of natural home for e-assessment, and then sort of cycling out, talking a bit about how our senior colleagues view e-assessment, our chair of board of examiners, and then our partners in engineering, and then finally some perspectives from the Central University on numbers. Each of these was advertised to those people as a 15-minute discussion, but actually they turned into almost entirely an hour each discussion. If you've never done this before, it's a great exercise. I really enjoyed it. It's nothing like just sort of sitting down with a colleague and just chatting to them with no sort of no real agenda, but just chatting to them about, positives, negatives, anything they like for an hour. It was a really great experience. I'd recommend for anybody thinking about doing some research to add on, to any number crunching you're doing. So I'm going to start sort of inside our school. In the background to my slides is a pie chart, a wheel that's going to grow. It's just there for visual decoration, but you'll see it grow and that's sort of a visual representation of how much of our numbers activity is involved at each of these parts of my talk. So I'm going to start really, as I mentioned, at the core of what we do, which I think that sort of natural home of e-assessment, which is our stage 1, our transition from pre-university to university stage 1. So stage 1 is the first year of our undergraduate degree programs here at Newcastle, and we have at that stage of our student studies, we have 8 core maths modules. They cover sort of calculus, algebra, dynamics, logic, set theory, programming. They cover that sort of core content, the stuff that later stages really depends on. So it's all about building sort of solid foundations. And we've used numbers in this stage for quite some time. And the current picture is that we have these 8 modules at stage 1, and 7 of those use numbers quite extensively for coursework, alongside some written elements. So our in-course assessments in these modules, they're quite frequent, which is relevant to something I'll talk about in a second. So they get assessed every 2 weeks. With sort of low stakes assessments, and about half of those are automatically assessed with numbers. And then we have sort of high stakes final exams in these modules. So typically 80% of the module is in a final exam, and 4 of those are entirely written. 4 of those take a hybrid approach, and I'm going to talk quite a lot about hybrid approaches in my talk today. So these are exams where we do a bit of auto marked with numbers and a bit of hand marked written work. And we've been doing quite a bit with this stuff over recent years. Really started with COVID, and since then these formats have become quite popular. So of those 4, they've taken different approaches. So one of those was an online test off campus where students uploaded some of their work to our VLE, to our learning management system, and some of the work was marked automatically. 2 of them were in-person invigilated exams where students did some of their work on paper alongside what they were doing on the computer. And one of those was organized to be 2 separate exams, one where everything was automatically marked, and one which was a traditional written exam. So different ways of doing this sort of hybrid approaches to exams. So it's quite an interesting stage of studies. You'll see that one module that did not use numbers for coursework, that's actually our calculus module, and that was moved to fully written a couple of years ago on sort of pedagogic grounds, that the module leader really wanted to exaggerate that approach to writing mathematics. And there's been, I think, a mixed response to that, as I'll talk about in a second. So that's the stage we're talking about. And I chatted with our transition officer. So our transition officer is, if you like, a head of year for stage 1, and it was our maths transition officer. So I'm focusing on the maths side here. So I met up with our transition officer to have a chat about some of these things, and they have really close knowledge of what's going on at that stage. They have students coming and talking to them for hours on end about their concerns and hopes and dreams for their stage 1 studies. So they know a lot about what's going on. So we talked a bit about how e-assessment is being used in transition, and I think they were really positive about how numbers is being used there. So in particular, this opportunity to have formative randomized questions that, preaching to the choir of people here, you will know that that e-assessment systems mathematics really excel at, and a very positive response from students to that sort of transition into their degree, and being able to really practice and build that groundwork. I chatted to them about how students see their in-course assessments. So there's definitely an overriding crisis of well-being that's going on with our students. And I know from speaking to people elsewhere that they're having similar. And I think about workload in particular. Students really feel that these online assessments are much less onerous. So they often find that they are writing out their solutions. When they're doing written assessments, they have to write it out again to tidy it and fix mistakes. And they really appreciate that sort of more relaxed approach of e-assessment, that they can come and have a go and pause it and continue. And certainly our transition officer was speaking well about that aspect. And they very much appreciate that quicker marking. So these modules have around 200 students in them, and the issues that the one module with written assessments has had is that they're not able to turn around the marking in between one assessment and the next. So students aren't getting that feedback that would be helpful to them as they move through, and they're often struggling to get that feedback back by the time, you know, the next assessment after that has started. So that's really become a problem, and I think a rethink in that module will be happening going forward. So they do appreciate that quick marking, being able to get feedback. And the opinion of our transition officer is that numbers is most impactful in this hybrid mode, where you have you know, some marked automatically and some working out. I feel that, you know, we really need to see that working and motivate students to engage with, you know, writing mathematics. It does need to be nurtured. So they're reflected on definitely having the positives of having this hybrid approach. So that was our transition officer. So moving around my chart there, so our bigger picture of math, stats and physics takes up getting on for a third of all activity. This is actually in terms of the number of modules engaged with the assessment. And looking at the big picture, we have so the shading here represents how much numbers activity is going on within a module. So that's the sort of number of assessment attempts. And the shading gets deeper the more there is. It's compared to the highest use module there. So we see really stages 1 and 2 numbers is embedded quite heavily across the program. The codes won't mean anything to you here, but roughly speaking, the first third, in terms of moving horizontally, the first third on the left is pure mathematics. The middle third, the ones that have an 8 as the second digit, is applied mathematics, and the ones on the right is statistics. So we see across the board a lot of use of the assessment at stages 1 and 2, and then a real smattering of use beyond that. And it was interesting when putting this together that it's almost exclusively in applied maths at stages 3 and 4. It was a bit disappointing, actually. I think there are a lot of opportunities for sort of individualized data sets and that sort of thing in our later statistics stages, but it's not being used for that. Certainly the vast majority of uses at stage 1 and 2. So I grabbed our Director of Education to chat through that sort of wider picture and asked them first of all about what benefits they see of having an e-assessment tool. Because you have to bear in mind that we've had numbers in place for over 10 years now, so it wasn't brought in to fill a hole, to be a solution to a problem, or with a business case for what the benefits would be. So the benefits really have evolved over time. I think the landscape we have now is, I think, very different from what it was when we started. And certainly the view of our Director of Education, who oversees sort of learning and teaching of our school, is that for the staff right now, it's about workload. So we have a lot of workload pressures, I think, for our colleagues, and for students actually very similar. So we see students stressing a lot about how much assessment they have, and definitely some benefits in terms of workload there as well. We talked about that sort of less onerous nature, but also about that timeliness of feedback that they get. And I think there's a view that for our school, there's a sort of the modern approach associated with digital assessment is something that we use as a sort of unique selling point at our recruitment events and things like that as well. I asked about sort of good and bad use of the assessment that they've seen, and I think picking out 2 things, we see some areas where things have gone badly because a lot of jeopardy is put on sort of a single answer box for a lot of working out. So students are doing a page of working and then putting one answer, and everything is, on that sort of the pressure of having put the syntax incorrect and not making a silly mistake. And I think where they see numbers used really well is where there's that sort of tailored feedback. So using features for sort of error carried forward marking, or giving credit for alternative answers, where we've reduced the jeopardy of having a sort of single answer box, or are really giving sort of very tailored feedback to students. We chatted about the main challenges to adoption, and that really workload is a big thing, but also about awareness of what's possible and opportunities for training as well. And that was really reflected when I chatted to some of our colleagues, so individual academics working in our schools, and I had a number of these dialogues, and really only scratching the surface about what I'm talking about here. But there's two things to pick out. So one was about that written work. So I chatted to one colleague about their written exam, and that was really interesting, that although they had a written exam and were promoting the writing of mathematics, in practice they had 500 students and were only marking the bottom line. And so that was quite interesting. And I'd wondered whether they had their assessments the wrong way around, actually, because they weren't having the opportunity to give feedback on that written mathematics in the exam, whereas in the coursework it was automatically marked. So the only feedback opportunity for written work was the exam, and they weren't able to give that to students. So that was an interesting chat. We chatted about training. The idea that there is never really a good time for our academic colleagues. So, but equally, they sort of need it on demand. Workshops that we're running are sort of never really at the right time for people. So we actually took this feedback and put together some sort of office hours and things like that to try and accommodate more on-demand support for questions. And finally, in our school, I chatted to our chair of our board of examiners. So that's the person who oversees examinations in our school and the awarding of degrees. So they had they were pro replacing some written assessments with digital. They didn't see any real concerns where it was used appropriately. So there are some topics limited in number where it's really appropriate. So that sort of more basic computations, that stage one stuff where we're creating a sort of basis on which knowledge is built. But there's definitely a need for that higher level mathematical writing at later stages. And we talked about hybrid solutions, so some of that stuff that's going on at stage one, and actually our chair of board of examiners was a module leader for one of those hybrid exams. And they were very positive about those approaches, seeing the benefits to workload for colleagues while also being able to assess the mathematical writing parts. We talked about AI, which of course is going to be a topic this week. So they weren't particularly concerned, and I think that's down a lot to the structure of our assessment, where we have these high stakes final exams, which are invigilated, closed book, and these smaller in-course assessments are really more about engagement. So the impact of AI on those assessments is really going to be about students who, if they don't engage properly, are missing out on learning opportunities. There was some concern for in small pockets for our projects and things like that, of course. And I was interested in the view of external examiners, and they really see these digital exams on their own merits. So that was good to know. So moving around, I've included now the School of Engineering. So between maths and engineering, we take over half of the activity in our university. And actually, the use in engineering really dwarfs our own in maths down because of the number of students that they have. So in terms of the number of assessments, they have many more than us. Almost over half of our total assessments are in engineering. In terms of the number of modules, it's very similar. But one of the interesting things that's going on in engineering since COVID in particular is that they're using numbers extensively for final exams. So we ran 20 this year. So these were invigilated final exams, part of the central digital exam offering that our university has. We're really going for it on that part. So we have an engineering champion in that school, and I chatted to them, and also a colleague who's in surveying and very interested in the use of e-assessment as well. And we chatted first of all about their stage 1 exams. So their stage 1 modules have, in some cases, over 500 students, and they do rely heavily on online assessment, on automatic assessment. They really don't have the resources to mark by hand. And they are split somewhat between a dedicated maths assessment tool, numbers, and a general online assessment tool called Inspira, which is our university-approved digital exam software. And I chatted to them about what they use both for, and for the latter, that is used for modules where they're mostly doing multiple choice questions. So the modules we are really trying to assess that sort of mathematical input, or the use of units or scientific notation or mathematical expressions, are going down the specialist numbers route. We talked about how it's being used in their modules. So they're doing some really innovative things. So stuff like using numbers in lab-based activities, where they are getting students to enter data into the software and then able to do the analysis of that data straight after, and then have it automatically marked. So the working is marking it's using the data that they input to mark the analysis. So really interesting stuff. And they had no awareness of options for hybrid assessments that we're doing quite heavily in maths. So they were quite interested in that stuff. So a lot of their colleagues saw things as all or nothing. So if they needed a written aspect, they were sticking with written assessment. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And we talked about how we connect, which is really for us internally. We don't coordinate enough between our team in maths and their team in engineering. So what's the rest of the pie chart? Well, it's made up of some of the variety of other schools. So significant parts are our sort of foundation programs, chemistry, biomedical sciences, business school. Into is our international transition courses, and then a smattering of others. I wanted to talk here on sort of like university level about exams. So I mentioned Inspira earlier. So Inspira is our approved digital exam solution. We had a tender for a bit of software that could allow, in particular for other schools, written input on a computer. But we've sort of muscled our way to having numbers as an alternative approved software. So it's right there on, so the screenshot there is from the university exam form, the form that goes to academics around the university about if they want a digital exam, what options do they want to choose? And it's taken quite a bit of work to get there. We've really sort of pushed our way into a lot of the processes that underlie digital exams. So the steering groups, the invigilator training that goes on to make sure they're familiar with the software, and the administration, so the checking, setup of exams, and then the exam support, so the support channels, the on-call support that happens during exams and that sort of thing. So we've really sort of pushed our way into that. Not numbers specific, what I'm going to talk about really is, how this could happen at other universities with whatever mathematical software you're using. Newcastle is a heavy user of digital, or at least I think it is. I don't have a good feel, and my colleagues in our sort of central unit don't have a good feel either about how this compares to other universities. But we do, so we don't have final numbers for this academic year, but we think it's about 41% of exams, of all exam sittings this year will be digital. And of that, around 8% we think will be numbers-based, and the rest in Spira. In semester one, we have firmer numbers, and numbers made up 10% of all exam sittings, which is quite an extraordinary thought, actually. I think when I'm on the train and see all the students going into their exams, that 1 in 10 of them are getting off the train to go to an exam using our software. Is quite a scary thought. What I've seen from working with our central team is that this is a really complex sort of a system that's in place, complex support architecture that surrounds digital exams. So we have a digital exams team centrally. We have just an exams team who traditionally worked with written papers. We've got our IT support service as well. A lot of different pieces of jigsaw go into this. And there's a lot goes on with supporting digital exams. So, I've talked about training of invigilators and, making sure invigilators in rooms know what they're doing, room bookings to make sure that we have, the clusters available to run these things, technical issues that might come about. So computers falling over, students not being able to log in, backup papers if things go wrong, printing of invigilator instructions, printing of student instructions for exams. It's a lot going on. Students bringing their own devices and how they're set up. And that is useful context for a conversation I had with the team manager of our university's sort of learning and enhancement activities, so our learning and enhancement team management. So he sits in our sort of central learning and teaching support unit at the university. So I chatted to them a bit about, I was really interested in, what they would do if they didn't have us. So we are unique in that we have this team that they can call upon, but how would they manage without us? And so we chatted first of all about what they would do, and they think that Inspira, our sort of more general solution, just doesn't have the specialist features that are required. So they'd worry about having that expertise to be able, the technical ability to run these exams, the expertise to support a solution, and would struggle to interpret the needs of colleagues in maths and engineering in particular. And we had this tender a few years ago, it was just before COVID, 2019 maybe, and he thinks that would have been very different without having already a solution for mathematical exams, and that they might have looked to for a solution that accommodated those a bit better, or maybe something separate that could be brought on to help. A really interesting chat about the concerns about non-Inspira exams, so exams that are not their standard. So there's a lot of worry about running these non-standard exams, and some of those are ours that we run with numbers, and some of those are, like people in engineering wanting to run a sort of lockdown MATLAB exam, and they're doing their own thing. And they're very nervous about running anything that's non-standard, not so much with our stuff, but with with these other options. The other option in the exam book, they're really, really concerned. And I think what I would say to people, a lesson having had chat for colleagues who are maybe keen academics who are looking to persuade their university to take on a specialist mathsy assessment system. It's definitely not just about having a bit of software that you can write your exam in and be able to say, okay, that's fine. Can you just get students to use this software in the exam? having all these things behind that, the backup papers, the invigilation, the technical support, you really need to think about that bigger picture, about how that can be robust in terms of administration and running, as well as just the creation of the exam. We talked about the robustness of our exam teams, and that was a really interesting chat. So they asked me the classic question: what would happen if you got hit by a bus or a train? And actually, as it turns out, we have more people because we have the specialist unit in maths. We actually have more people in our team than they do supporting in SPIRA. And so that certainly made them feel better, but also got them reflecting on actually they need more people. If they're running 40% of exams in the university, they really should have more people behind this. So they maybe went into this a bit naive as well, that they thought, you put a tender out for a bit of software to run digital exams, but didn't really think about that bigger picture about how you actually administrate and run them. So that was really interesting chat. Okay, that's about it. I'm gonna stop there and take some questions. So 10 minutes left. So thank you very much for listening to me, and a big thank you to all of my colleagues who I had discussions with for taking all the time, and also as ever to my team here in the digital learning unit at Newcastle. So thank you, and I'll take some questions or start some discussion. Thank you.